I'd like to welcome everybody for joining us. We are going to give about another minute or so for people to start filing in, and we will get started. Thanks. All right. Well, we are getting some people joining us. I really appreciate everybody's time, taking time out of the day and joining us. Welcome to the NCRPS webinar, Talent, the Last Greatest Differentiator in the Cannabis Green Rush. We're really excited about this. We are the National Cannabis Risk Prevention Services. We help the industry and our partners through assessment, education, support, and expertise. We help cannabis businesses in a lot of different areas, including product safety, microbiological risk, worker safety, banking risk, and property and premise risk, among other things. I want to start off today, and we'll end it with a reminder as well that we're going to give a couple courses as gifts to everybody attending today's webinar. So we have 2 talent optimization courses that Chris Picardi, our guest, and PI Midlantic developed, and we're going to give those out. We are going to have you guys reach out to us, and I am just notified that we are having a little problems with our comment section. I did put in Stephanie's email there, but we'll get that. We'll get her email to you. If you reach out to her, we'll get you plugged into those courses, and we'll give them to you. So we're really excited about that. And at the end of the discussion, we will take some question and answers. So please find that Q&A section and type up any questions that you may have, and we'll try to get to them all at the end of the webinar here. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Chris Picardi, Talent Optimization Advisor from PI Midlantic. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me, Alex. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Great. No, I'm really excited about this because this is, from my view, one of the biggest issues and risks in cannabis business right now, and is talent issues. The industry is really hard to compete in this industry, hyper competitive, really thin margins. I think a lot of people are focusing on a lot of things, and I think, unfortunately, employment issues and employee issues and talent optimization has fallen through the cracks. I really think that a lot of talent optimization and the controls and things we can put in place can really solve a lot of the bigger issues with contamination and other things. So what I'd like to start off with is really tell us about Predictive Index and what businesses, what you guys do and what businesses you've helped.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for that introduction. And first of all, congratulations. I know there was, with the votes in the midterms, I know that there was some states that passed legalization, both medicinal and legal. So that's obviously great for the industry moving forward. But to answer your question, yeah, Predictive Index, we've been around for a long time, right? This is not something we've just drummed up in our basement. It actually started in 1955 by a gentleman named Arnold Daniels. And the story is pretty interesting. He was he went to MIT, Harvard, then MIT, and studied psychometrics and really had a knack for organizational development around it. But before that, his introduction to it came from being a part of one of the most successful bombardier squadrons in World War II. His team had over 30 plus missions with no casualties. So the Army actually sent a team of psychologists to evaluate their record and understand what made this team so successful. And through that, they started analyzing behaviors. And if you think about it, think about a bomber pilot. There's chaos going on around you, but you have to stay steady in the face of all that and stick to the plan. Right? And then think about a fighter pilot. You have to be that maverick and you have to be able to thrive in chaos and shift quickly. So Arnold Daniels saw the impact of that in organizational development and construction and brought predictive index into the workplace in 1955. So been around for a very long time. And PI Midlantic, we are actually the largest provider of the predictive index, one of the original 6. And when it comes to businesses, what's great about what we do is if you have people, you have problems, right? And every industry has us. So, at its core, we apply to all different businesses from startups to Fortune 100 companies because, this is a tool that really helps us look at who we are, how we're built, and how is our talent aligned not only with the roles of the organization, but with the goals of the organization too.
Oh, that's great. No, that's really cool. Really cool history. So how do you define talent optimization and why is it important to the cannabis industry?
Yeah, good question. So I actually have a framework on here that describes what talent optimization is. And talent optimization is a framework that we actually got from leaders within the industry, or leaders in general, where we asked them, hey, what are your strategic focuses year over year? And we polled around 5,000 CEOs, and every year they said strategy development was always 35% or higher, and then talent strategy was right behind that year over year. Right? But there's really no framework that says, here's the work that needs to be done, here are your people, and how do they align to that, right? So that's what talent optimization stemmed from. It's a framework to help make people problems preventative, not reactive. And when you look at this, we call this the TIE Fighter module for any of you Star Wars fans out there. When you look at it, all organizations have a business strategy in order to achieve a business result. At the end of the year, you either hit it or you didn't, right? And when you look back, one of the main reasons organizations fail to achieve their objectives is people. Right? We're either too siloed, we're too much turnover, so we're spending all our time training and redeveloping. Mismanagement causes chaos in our processes and systems. Everything tends to be people-based. So this is a basic infrastructure built on 4 aptitudes. And the first is design. And when you look at design, think about this as putting your basic talent infrastructure in place. And what this does is it allows us to look at teams in the organization, not individual people, but teams. Leadership teams. And when you think about it, a great leadership team for a tech startup would make a terrible leadership team for a hospital, and vice versa, because one's built for speed, one's built for compliance. So we want to understand, how are those teams built, right? And how do those natural strengths of theirs compare with the goals they've been asked to accomplish? We put so much focus on margins, derivative ratios, not enough on our talent and how we're built to get there. And that's what design is really intended to do, is putting that infrastructure in place to say, how are we built to execute on our strategies, and are we clear in that vision? Once we do that, then it's hire, right? And hire is pretty understandable. It's bringing in the right people for the right roles. And when you look at the cannabis industry, as you know, turnover is pretty atrocious in a lot of these roles. And I was reading through a couple reports, and one of them said 60% of entry-level cannabis employees leave within the first 2 months. Couple that with the fact that the average cost per hire is for entry level is right around $5,000. Companies are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in turnover costs because of poor hiring, because of poor onboarding. Onboarding is just as important as candidate fit too. And then development strategy. So the industry is learning really the hard way that churning through people and just hiring with gut and trying to get bodies in there is a tremendous drain on revenue. right? And it also takes the fun out of owning the business. So yeah, hires about understanding what are the behavioral demands of the role. Jobs have behaviors too, especially those trimmers and those bud tenders and inventory specialists.
Yeah.
Is understanding what are the demands of that role, and then how do our candidates fit to that, so we can understand how motivated and how engaged are they going to be by the work that they're doing every day. Right? Those are two pretty important pieces. But I say this to my clients all the time: guarantee you'll get good people in the door if you do this. Can't guarantee they're going to stay. That stay factor comes down to the organization, the manager, the culture, right? Are we giving them what they need to manage, to stay managed and stay motivated more effectively? So this is all about leadership development, and really helping us keep the top performers that we have, create environments where they're engaging, which is very important with bud tender roles in particular, which we'll get to later. And then the last is what we call diagnose. And diagnose is just taking your KPIs, your employee metrics, and looking at how is employee engagement across all different aspects of the organization to see what's working and what's not. And where do we really need to focus our efforts to make our people problems, turnover, disengagement, preventative and not reactive.
Oh, that's great. Wow. Yeah, this industry, it's obviously still very young, and there's still a lot of issues with employees. You know, there was a report out that 90% of theft claims are internal, meaning 90% of the times when money or product stolen from a business, it's from employees. There's, you know, a lot of reports out there to enforcement agencies, and a significant amount of these are coming from employees or former employees. How would PI or PI Mid-Atlantic handle these issues for the cannabis businesses?
That is a great question. And I know that's a serious problem in all different verticals of the cannabis industry in general. And I like that question because it's important to clarify what we do measure and also what we don't measure as well. Predictive index measures your natural tendencies, your core competencies. It's what comes naturally to you. We all have natural strengths. We all have natural weaknesses or blind spots associated with those strengths. So it's really measuring your workplace styles. And a good exercise I'll do with all the leadership teams is I'll have them write their name with their good hand. And I'll ask them how that feels. And you know, everybody knows how that feels. It's easy. But then I'll have them write their name with their bad hand. And then ask them how that feels. And that's the aha moment as it relates to what we're measuring here is your comfort zones, your core behaviors. It's what comes naturally to you. So if Alex, if you don't mind showing the next slide on here, what we don't measure, you know, morals, values, right? What drives people. You kind of uncover those during the interview process and understanding, hey, what are they passionate about, right? And really digging into who they are as a person and who they are, what are their passions lie, what are their morals tend to align with, right? And that's part of it, right? But the other part is when you're measuring your talent that you're bringing in, and this is a really good depiction of how we use PI in the workplace. Everybody, you know, we typically measure your education, your knowledge, your skills. That's what you look for because you get that off the resume, right? Traditionally, that's how companies and all organizations hire. It's the what have they done, it's the where have they done it. This changes over time. In the top part of this, you have the behavioral and cognitive aspects of individuals, which is measuring, will they be motivated? Will they be engaged by the work that they're doing every day and the environments that they're in? And then cognitively, can they keep up with the demands of that role and the rapid rate of change and adaptation that's required in it? Okay? You have to measure everything well in these folks. And one good way to really look at this is asking yourself, what are the more knowledge and skills-based roles that we have within our organizations, and what are the more behaviorally based roles that we have within our organizations? If we're hiring for a CFO, you're going to put more emphasis on this, your skills and knowledge, but the behaviors are going to also help us understand what type of leader are we getting? How are they going to lead their teams? How are they going to align with the dynamic that we currently have? And how do they align with the strategies we're driving? If you're hiring for a bud tender, a trimmer, an inventory specialist, a lot of those entry-level roles, those are highly behaviorally driven roles, right? Where you can teach them the knowledge and skills to do the job, but you can't teach the behaviors. You can't teach the patience to focus on tasks for long periods of time in that role, right? So when you're evaluating candidates, you have to measure everything well. But when it comes to theft, right, the way I look at behavior analytics applying to theft in the workplace is if you put the right people in the right roles, if you manage them in a way that they want to stay, that they're bought into you, they're bought into their manager, right, and the culture aligns with, they're going to be far less likely to steal because they're going to be far happier with where they're at and less likely to want to go behind a teammate that they've built strong relationships with because you've looked out for them. They're going to be more likely to look out for you. So while we can't measure morals, we can look at, creating environments that are engaging where people don't want to steal from you.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, great answer. Yeah, and one of the other big issues you've already alluded to is turnover in the industry, and there's reports that 60% of trimmers there's a 60% of turnover rate there. From a behavioral perspective, what do you think is driving that turnover?
Good question, especially with trimmer roles, right? When you look at trimmer roles, you look at roles in general, it's very important to match the pace of the individual to the pace of the role. This is what leads to the most turnover of any really individual factor that we measure, but is misalignment between the pace and how individuals want to operate, right? It's extremely frustrating and it leads to the most turnover of any individual factor, and that applies here. Because when you look at the impact of repetitive motion roles such as trimmers, it's been studied across multiple industries. Look at automation or automotive industry for one. That's where it's been most prominent. But when you look at the behavioral demands of pruning and trimming, even inventory management to an extent, all of them require to a certain degree the ability to really focus on one task for long periods of time and to see that task through to completion. And for that reason, repetitive motion roles particularly are the most sensitive to turnover. You can teach somebody the skills to do the trimming, but you can't teach the patience to do it, right? And automotive industries really address that through the automation of it, but cannabis isn't here yet. So what you're looking at is the job target, or this is considered the gold standard of the standard of excellence for the behavioral demands of a certain role. Now, you don't know what you're looking at here, which is why I put this description here as well. But one of the main things we want to look for when it comes to trimmer roles, when it comes to those repetitive motion roles, is this little orange column right here, which represents patience. Okay, patience is the drive for consistency and stability. Right? You want to make sure you're putting high patience individuals in those high patient roles where they can focus on tasks for long periods of time. And one of the biggest mistakes we see is wanting to take a warm body, wanting to get them in, but we're taking in folks that like variety, that like monotony, that want results, that want to break up the consistency. Right? And when you put them in those roles where they have to focus, it's very draining for them. When change requires energy, think of writing with your bad hand. So this is why we see with the clients that we've worked with, significant amounts of turnover in the trimmer role because of misalignment to the demands of the role. Right? When you look at this is saying the trimmer roles are going to be serious, reserved. They want freedom from risk and error, understanding of rules and regulations. They want to achieve goals consistently and efficiently, and they're going to be comfortable working on tasks for long periods of time. Right? And for that reason, it's very important to make sure we're identifying the behaviors with trimmer roles, because that's what makes it the most sensitive to turnover.
Well, that's great. And one of the other roles that has in this industry that has tremendous turnover are bud tenders. There's been the report out 55% of bud tenders are in that position within a year. Can you touch on bud tenders for a little bit here?
Yeah, and I was gonna great. I wanted to show this too, because when you look at trimmers versus bud tenders, they're similar in the sense that we want them to be diligent, conscientious, and risk averse. right? Cross your T's, dot your I's, don't overpromise what you can't deliver. Make sure we're checking the system and the inventory to make sure that they have the right amount still left to provide the guest and the customer, right? And that's what we're measuring here for both the trimmers, both and the bud tenders. The main difference is bud tenders are very people oriented. They're the face of your organization. And they're outgoing, engaging. They like others. They want to be liked. And then the second biggest difference is the pace at which they work. There's a little more variety, right? They like that change of pace. They want to break up the monotony. And so just looking at the behavioral demands of the trimmer role versus the bud tender role, there's already significant differences there. But when we look at turnover, doing a lot of research and also working with some of the clients that we have, it seems like the common theme that you always see with turnover is lack of feeling appreciated and respected. And that makes sense because this is a hyper growth, hyper competitive industry where margins are everything and we're really trying to drive outcomes quickly, right? But when you look at bud tenders, they're true team players. They want to do what's best for the organization. They want to feel like you're looking out for them too. And that's going to motivate them. They are the face, right? When people come in and when people walk in, when clients walk in, the bud tenders are the first person they see. They're the face of the organization. They're key players. They're stakeholders, right? And they should be treated as such. So think about a bud tender who's outgoing, engaging, who's working for a boss who just believes you should come, get a paycheck, show up, get your check and leave, right? It's only a matter of time before they're going to leave because they want to feel bought in. They want to feel respected. Everybody wants to feel important and valuable. Right? So I think one of the main reasons that we see this is the stress of managers to hit goals, to cut costs, to make sure that we're profitable. And the pace at which the industry is growing right now can weigh on those managers, which ultimately leads them to drive profit and results over driving people and culture.
That's great. I want to touch on one of the other roles that you mentioned, inventory management or inventory manager, because there's a lot of times you get these bud tenders that move into that role. And I'd like you to maybe just talk a little bit about the differences in those roles behaviorally and what you think of that.
Yeah, we thought this is important because I know Alex dealt with this where clients that need a body, inventory specialist, there's a lot of turnover in it because if you look at this target, again, doesn't mean much to you, but very repetitive, very process oriented, stick to the plan, and bring a high level of accuracy and precision. Well, you want that in inventory management, because if not, that leads to significant impacts on inventory mismanagement, which could be a threat to your license. So, we've seen and worked with clients that will say, we need somebody in there, and they'll take a bud tender and throw them into this role. Well, when you look at, and just to kind of clarify, the orange is the job target. What you're looking at here, the A, B, and C, and D is what we call a candidate's behavioral profile. So it shows us what are their natural behavioral strengths, but also what are some of the weaknesses associated with those strengths? What types of environments are they going to be engaging in? And this says this individual is very intense, restless, wants variety, a lot of opportunity to work at a faster pace. They're going to be very outgoing. They want opportunities to interact. Do you want that in an inventory management role where they're going to be working, a lot of the times heads down versus heads up, and we need them to be comfortable bringing high levels of precision and accuracy and consistency in that role? I don't know, right? And that's where that C drive and the mismatch there is the most sensitive to turnover. And that's, I think, where we see a lot of that turnover.
Well, that's really interesting. Wow. All good stuff. And like you said, this is a hyper competitive, hyper growth focused industry. We see a lot of leadership teams facing a lot of challenges, right? There's, maintaining compliance issues is always one. I mean, something that's near and dear to my heart and every other cannabis producers out there, I'm sure. Product contamination.
Yeah.
There's a lot of leadership teams that have issues between being business focused and operational focus, challenges like that. So, these risk tolerant leaders, again, this industry is just full of risk tolerant people, and being in this risk averse, compliance driven world, you, tell us what you've seen with that dynamic.
Yeah. So everything starts with the leaders. Everything starts with the leadership team, the direction of the organization, the strategic initiatives we're focusing on. Right. So the most frequent challenge I think we see with leadership teams is striking that balance, especially in cannabis, is striking the balance between the entrepreneurial behaviors like growth and innovation, getting
Mhm.
revenue in the door, and then the operational efficiencies that come with that, like scalability and building processes. And when you look at any owner operator, their first thought is grow, grow, grow. Right? But then eventually you get to the point where you need to scale, 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 and build processes in place to maintain that growth. It's getting out of that growth mindset and understanding when and where and how and where to put that focus is oftentimes where we see mistakes happen. Because when you look at the cannabis industry, it's an organization that's led by passionate visionaries or risk tolerant leaders. And like we said, those skills are excellent for growth. Right? Not the best when it comes to organizations that need to scale. So when you look at this slide, this is actually an example of a client of ours that we worked with on the cultivation side. Now we changed the names for confidentiality reasons, and I'm not going to state who, obviously, for confidentiality reasons. But what you're looking at is our team discovery tool. And this lets you assess your team's strategic goals, collective behavioral identities, side by side. So you can see how the team's built compared to the direction we're trying to go in, right? And lets us know where the team might need extra support in order to execute on those strategies and take the risk out of the execution of those strategies. So in this example, with this leadership team, the reason they reached out to us is they had several employees log multiple complaints to OSHA, to cannabis regulators regarding number of health and safety infractions. I think it was poor air quality was one, lack of proper safety equipment necessary. Yeah, lack of safety equipment, which was a big one. So they had several complaints, several visits. After being threatened with loss of license, they decided we need to do something about this and take action to prevent this from happening again. So we assess their team. And when you look at this tool, this breaks down the teams based on their common individual strengths. So we're looking at them individually here. In a minute, we'll look at them collectively. And this plots based on where they fall. Individuals that fall up here in this innovation and agility quadrant are very growth minded. Success looks like innovation. They tend to move fast. They tend to be assertive. They want to come up with new ideas. They're very high level thinkers. Okay. They want to drive, they're focused on the end result, not necessarily how we get there. On the bottom here is results and discipline, same proactive, results oriented, but they're not going to sacrifice quality for speed or innovation like you might find up here. Think of a general, like an army general. You got goals to hit, but we need to plan too. On the bottom here is process and precision. And this is where I tend to see very little leadership teams in the industry fall, right? Because you have to be comfortable with risk going into this industry. Yeah. There's a lot of unknowns. Regulations are constantly changing. You almost have to, right? Folks down here, very calculated risk takers. They're driven to cross their T's and dot their I's. These are process builders. This is where scalability comes from. And up here's teamwork and employee experience, right? Think like companies that represent this are like Southwest, Mom's Organic Market. It's all about the customer experience. It's all about the culture. Right. So the way to read this is opposite quadrants are the hardest to flex to, meaning this team's so built for growth and innovation. They're ambitious, they're goal oriented, they're future focused. They're always thinking about what's next. Teams like this are hyper focused on the big picture, but with strengths come weaknesses, both as individuals and teams. So Alex, if you want to show the next slide. And this is showing the team type. This is an exploring team type, and it gives you strengths. It gives you blind spots too as well. And if we're a growth-minded team, we drive outcomes quickly. We may not take time to develop a strategic plan because of that need to drive quickly. We may have inconsistent processes. So on this slide, we sat down with the team and we worked through it, highlighted specific examples of actions taken or ones that we failed to take. We analyze the why behind it, discuss how will we approach it differently. So that was all about helping them understand themselves. Then you take it a step further. You mind the next slide?
Gotcha. Yep.
So when we started talking about, well, what was the cause of this and what are we focusing on now? And clearly their focus was on building processes to prevent this from happening again. These purple columns represent their strategic initiatives that they agreed as a leadership team, we are focusing on these. Well, it happened to all be about efficiency, scalability, implementing new systems to make us predictable, right? So when you add that strategy in there, the strengths and the blind spots change because the system's analyzing how is that team built to execute on the strategies they're trying to drive. This is an exploring team built for innovation, focusing on a stabilizing strategy, which is all about processes and procedures, right? Now, can these folks do it? Yeah, they can. Does it come naturally to them? Absolutely not. They like the growth. They want that shiny new coin. That's what drives them, right? Not the getting into the weeds. So as we worked through this page, a couple of things stood out. Right? In this first strength, you often come up with innovative ways to achieve processes and precision, especially when complicated tasks don't have a straightforward path to consistency. Some of you on the call may have leadership teams that this sounds like you, and you probably work for leadership teams that sound like that. But that's a strength. Blind spots are associated with that strength. May have trouble sticking to defined processes and systems. And so as they work through that page, they realize the need to focus on growth and expansion outweighed the need to take time to establish and improve their internal processes and systems as they grew. So they just had the same structure, but didn't expand it to the needs of their growth, which led to poor quality, that's led to improper equipment, right? So that light bulb went off, right? And they realized what they needed to do. And we created a action item where identified who's going to own it, and then what support do they need to execute on it, right? And created timelines around when is this going to be done and what do we need to do. So by aligning dynamics side by side, it really helps leadership teams understand and almost slow down to an extent, because it's such a growth-minded industry right now where we're trying to constantly outbid the person next to us. Well, the ones that can slow down and reduce the bottom line are probably the ones that are going to stay the longest.
Wow. No, this is just amazing stuff. I love the science behind it all, and it really, I mean, it makes sense. And it's just such a, this type of approach is what the industry needs. And I think you're right. I think a lot of these businesses out there existing, you're going to find are an exploring team, are really just out there, and they need that stabilizing, grounding personnel to really help them build out their vision.
That's why we have you. It's because we have so many of these exploring teams. They need you to come in, and
I appreciate that. And we are here for the cannabis industry, obviously. No, and I don't want to circle back. We're a little bit over time, but we're going to take a couple questions. But before we do, I want to thank everybody for joining us here, and I want to remind them, everybody who's taken a part of this webinar, we are going to reach out to you, because I realized as we started that the chat apparently is not functioning well, but we'll reach out to everybody. We'll give you access to our 2 talent optimization courses that Chris developed. And can you tell us a little bit about those 2 courses, Chris?
Yeah. So the 2 courses really dive into, the first one's called Hire and Inspire, and it really dives into the process that we approach talent optimization from a hiring standpoint and the impact it's had on cannabis. So you saw some of the graphs there. That explains what we're measuring, how we measure it, and why it's important, both from a selection standpoint, but also a retention standpoint in terms of giving them what they need. And then the second course is on design, which is how do we use this to build teams that align with the strategies, and why is that so important? So it really focuses and breaks that down on those 3 aptitudes in terms of talent optimization. And then afterwards, it says if you or your team want to complete the assessment, it only takes about 6 to 8 minutes to complete. But if you or your team want to complete it, reach out. provide you with an example of it, and can even do an executive overview with your team.
Awesome. No, I'm really excited about these courses. Again, this is something that the industry as a whole really needs. This is great information, and it's everybody's looking how to improve their existing teams, and what type of personnel they need to build upon the team that they have. So excellent. Thank you for that. Looks like we got time for a couple questions here. And the first one is about ex-employees who are disgruntled and the ex-employees affecting the current morale. What type of advice would you give in that type of situation?
Yeah, again, it goes back to disengagement. Disengagement's cancer. It's like wildfire, it just spreads. So, and that's part of it, is these operations, these dispensaries, you have a lot of bud tenders running around. If one's irritated, these are vocal people persons.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be afraid to express their frustrations to one person or another. And I think that's why the industry as a whole is seeing the importance of almost slowing down and taking the time to develop our people. And if we can develop our people and our teams to create better dynamics, to build a level of tolerance to working together, but also training your managers to say, here's how these folks are different and here's how to get the most out of them, is going to go a long way in reducing that disengagement. Right? You're always going to have it. It's just, how do we address it? I think the important thing is, first and foremost, create environments that are engaging for them by managing to their strengths, not yours. And that's very common as leaders. If I'm highly dominant and assertive, I'm going to communicate to people the way I like to communicate. And that's not necessarily how they want to receive it. It can be demotivating rather than motivating. So I think it comes down to really self-awareness to the managers, self-awareness around the processes and systems internally, and how we're built to really execute on our goals. But it's a lot of words just to say, take the time to learn your people and create structure, talent structure in areas where you may not have it, like onboarding, for example. Very important focus for most organizations that don't necessarily put too much weight on it, but very significant impact to retention.
No, that's great. And there's another comment that came in, and she's making a good point that, the disgruntled employees have, validity in their complaints, obviously, a lot of the times, and should be given the space for those employees to, be heard, which I think is exactly what you're saying. Listen to the employees, right? I mean, that's a big part of this, right?
Yeah. I get managers frequently call saying, this employee stinks, I want to get rid of them. And my first comment is it them that stink, or is it you? We have the tools. We have this one tool. It's great. It's called a management strategy guide. And I'll give it to the leaders and say, this is a tool that says, here's how your employee wants to be managed and wants to be motivated. And how much of this are you giving them? And sit down with them and let them talk to you about it.
That's it. And that's what I really love about what you guys offer. It's learning how to understand the motivations of the employees and really give them what they need to thrive. No, I love it.
Yeah.
And one final question here, I'm getting some positive feedback on what we're talking about is, how does an employer with a team that wants to improve, their talent and optimize the talent, where do they start? What's the first step?
If they want to reach out, right? I would say the first step is complete the behavioral assessment on yourself, right? It takes 6 to 8 minutes to complete, very quick. And then you review it, you validate it, but then we talk about what's the impact, what are your pain points, where do we need to focus, right? That talent optimization framework is hiring a struggle, is our leadership team the struggle, or our managers not managing the right way? What's the focus? And then we'll talk about, hey, how can we address that issue and really develop a plan based on your needs, on how can we bring that approach to your organization. So I like to look at a shotgun approach versus a sniper approach. And let's pinpoint on what are the most frustrating needs, what's the biggest impact to your talent right now, and let's fix it. And if we address that and there's there's something else that pops up, well, then let's address that. And we're really tightening the steps as we go. Let's build strong hiring processes and onboarding systems. If we're still losing people, let's train our managers to keep them, right? If we're still losing people, maybe as a leader, we're constantly tinkering and changing and bringing so much unpredictability into the workforce, then maybe we're driving everybody out the door. So it helps us kind of gauge where the issues lie. So to answer the question, reach out.
No, this is all great stuff. Yeah. And obviously reach out to Chris Picardi. We're here at the NCRPS to help. Again, we're going to give all you guys the courses to give you a little deeper knowledge on what we were talking about today. The NCRPS is here to help you. PI Midlantic is here, and yeah, reach out. We want to help you guys, and thank you again for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this webinar. Hope you got a little bit out of it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at aherding, HEARDING at ncrps.com. If you need anything, we're here for you, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks for joining. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.